Hello, how's everybody doing out there? We're doing the Let's Rock and Roll our way into 2021. And we've got William Bernhardt with us today. He's the best-selling author of over 40 books. He's got some legal thrillers. He's got some writing books. He is a prolific guy. I mean, I can't even, my favorite thing about him is he tracks dinosaurs and makes homemade ice cream. But other than that, he's a lawyer and he's written legal thrillers. And since I have a legal thriller, I thought it'd be fun to interview him today to try to help authors learn some tips on getting their writing underway. So many people have the idea for a book, but they just don't know how to put it together. And William has been writing for a long time. He's won a lot of awards. Just go to his Facebook page, williambernhardt.com, and you will learn more about him. But I want to, rather than talk about him, I want to hear from him and find out what authors need to know. I think he's got 7 tips for authors on getting their writing underway for 2021 and getting their books done. William, does that sound good to you?
Sounds good to me, Melanie. How you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm so excited to meet you, and I don't even know where to start on introducing you. So I figured just you'll be your best advocate here.
Just talk.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about why do you feel the need to offer tips to best-selling writers? I mean, to helping aspiring authors. What drives you to help them achieve their goals?
I think what motivates me most is that I remember how hard it was for me to break into this business. I remember being really even very young, like 7 or 8, and going to the library every day and loving books and seeing those pictures at the back of the book and realizing, hey, you know what? Somebody writes these things. I mean, this is like somebody's job. That's the job I want to have, you know? But how do you do it? That's, a kid's growing up in a small town in Oklahoma. I'd never met a writer. I don't think there were any in the vicinity. It's hard to know how to do it. And, over time, I started to pick up a few things, but it's really that.
First, you had to go to law school, though. Why'd you go to law school?
Well, funny thing, I hadn't published that big blockbuster bestseller book yet. So, and sadly, not having
a living, huh?
Yeah, not having a trust fund or anything, I did have to pay the bills. And law school seemed like what you read, you write, you don't get sweaty, you don't have to understand math. It seemed like a good choice for me. Of course, what I never for a minute anticipated that I would end up using that legal education over and over again in my books. That's just a happy, fortuitous thing that worked out beautifully.
Yeah, I love that. You're my spirit. They say my spirit animal. I'm just going to call you my spirit brother. We get the exact same story. I can just plug this in when I want to talk about myself. I love it. So, so what, tell me, give us your first tip.
Okay, well, Sharon told me to come up with 7 tips. I was saying, I've started this whole Red Sneaker Center. We do a conference every year, WriterCon. We do seminars through the year. I've written 10 books on writing. So really, after 10 books, trying to distill it down to 7. I mean, if there were only 7 things, I could have written a lot fewer books, maybe.
Right. But what inspired you, before you start, what inspired you to want to teach the writing? Because I kind of do also, and I'm curious to hear your answer to that question.
Well, a couple of things. For one thing, I think it's hard to get good information about what I heard you earlier calling craft, which is the craft, the how-to of writing, which does not mean there aren't other things. You prepare yourself with a lifetime of reading. There's an art to it. There's theme and a takeaway but you've got to understand the craft, the nuts and bolts of good storytelling. And I found, although there are a lot of books on writing out there, there aren't very many practical, succinct, here's how you do it kind of books. So that's what I wanted to do with these Red Sneaker books. Every one of them is relatively brief. You can read it because it's not supposed to be an excuse for not writing. I've got to read this book. You read the book, it'll take maybe a couple hours, and then you get back to work and apply the things. And I originally did those to have textbooks in these classes, and then particularly as audiobooks, which I read, they started taking off and doing well. So now there's 10 of them.
Wow, that's really exciting because I do think more authors need to learn about the craft. And when they're puzzled by the word craft, then that means they really need to do some work. You know, there's scene, sequel, there's voice. You know, you can't switch from the third person to the first person. There's just so much to it. And plus, then you have to be a marketer and you have to be a speaker, and there's so many different skills besides just writing. So that's what kind of separates the wheat from the chaff here. So tell us, give us
And
your
that
first.
information is so hard to come by. I mean, I've been to college, so have you. And I took every class I could find that had the word writing in it. And yet to find actual nuts and bolts information about the craft of writing, and it was almost impossible. And now, as you say, whether you're publishing traditionally or self-publishing, there's so much more that you have to be involved with and knowledgeable about the marketing and everything else. So there's a niche for what we're providing with the Red Sneaker Center.
And why red sneakers?
I don't know. I was sitting there one day because I like my red sneakers. They're comfortable and they're practical and they're not pretentious, like a lot of writing advice out there. And I like a lot of books that seem to take 50 pages to make a point you could make in a few sentences and then quote excerpts. And, I thought, no, red sneakers, they got some pizzazz.
That's what I was going to say, like the Pope's red shoes,
Right,
they
but they're
stand
down
out.
to earth. And that's what I wanted this School of Instruction to be. At our annual conference, WriterCon, it's Labor Day weekend in Oklahoma City every year, but we stream it too. So you don't have to travel if you don't want to. Anyway, I try to find the best teachers, not always the most famous writers, although we've got plenty of those too. But I know a lot of great writers who I love who are terrible teachers. What I invite to the conference are the best teachers, the people who can really help you understand how to write a good book.
Wow, that's awesome. I'm so excited to learn about that. That it just sounds awesome. And so you think it'll be live next year? Or are you going to do live and because now I think we're doing hybrids, right? You're going to have it live maybe if it works, but also have it virtual.
We did both this year. We had it live. We wore masks and enforced social distancing and kept everybody safe, but we also streamed it, which allowed us to, we had people signing up from other countries, from
Right, right.
Australia and place. I'd never even considered that possibility, but that broadened the attendance so much that yes, we will definitely stream next year. I still think it's more fun to be there in person if you can. You get to actually meet people face to face and make connections and network, but if you can't or don't want to, then there's the streaming option.
Yeah, I've noticed that in my legal groups like the American Bar Association, the attendance and the registration rate has just gone up so much. But then of course, those of us that do it all the time really miss it. So that just sounds the red sneakers. So just look on, is there a red sneakers conference.com, a writercon.com? Is that what the web link is?
Writercon.org.
Okay.
And you can find out about all of this at my website, williambernhardt.com. You can go there and read about my books. You can click on Red Sneaker Writers, whatever you want to find out about.
Yeah, I just love what you've done. Well, let's launch into those 7 tips because if you distill right, yeah. If you will, yeah, and I want to hear about your legal thrillers too. So you go ahead and spice it up with a little bit of your examples from your own writing stories, if you will.
Sure, but people are going to think it's a bait and switch if I don't eventually give those 7 tips. None of these will be a surprise to anybody who's ever heard me speak or read any of those books, I suspect, or at least it won't be a surprise that my tip number 1 is write every day.
Simple. Why is that so important? Why is it so important?
Well, for one thing, that's how you get books done. I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad tidings, but a book does not write itself and it does not write quickly. Even a bad book takes, a sloppy first draft takes an enormous amount of time, and then to revise and refine. And this is why there are so many people, you probably know as well as I do, who start books but never finish them. It is just an investment of time. And there are always things you would rather be doing. I mean, the laundry looks really appealing when you should be
Organizing
writing a book.
hangers. Yeah, I organize hangers. Organize hangers? Really?
Sure.
That's even better than writing?
Anything is better. So you just need to set a schedule. And this is in a lot of those books, particularly the first one on story structure, where I try and get people to commit to a contract, sign a contract where you promise yourself you're going to spend X number of hours every day. Or if for some reason you just can't do it every day, set a weekly total. I'll put in 30 hours a week or whatever it is you manage. I know people are going to object. They're going to say, I can't do that. I've got this, that, or the other thing I've got to do. Hey, we've all got day jobs, right? You're practicing law. I used to practice law. I wrote my first 6 books while I was a baby associate all the way up to making partner at the biggest law firm in the state. Nonetheless, I found some time to write these books. And if I can find some time, I can just about guarantee anybody else can. It's just a matter of making the commitment. So figure out when you're going to do it. Maybe you get up earlier, maybe you stay up later, maybe you give up television, which will not hurt you in the slightest. And instead,
that's what I was going to say. How are you going to tear people away from Netflix? You know, I mean,
no, don't stream your life away. Give yourself those 2
don't stream
or
your
3
life away.
hours.
That's great. I love it. Don't stream your life away. Yeah, I'm gonna get that emboldened into something and hanging right over my TV. Don't stream your life away. That's
Great. Anyway, instead, spend those 2 or 3 hours every night working on your book.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really, really good advice because people underestimate it. Do people walk up to you all the time and say, hey, I've got a great idea for you? You know, they want you to write their book. You know?
That really does happen. That's not just a cliche from the movies. It's totally, and here's how it usually goes. They say, you know, I've got this great idea, but I just don't have time to write it. So I tell you what, I'll give you my idea. You do all that typing stuff and we'll split it 50-50. And I'm just like, newsflash, dude. Coming up with the idea is the easy part. Yeah. I have ideas that I know what to do with. I do not have time to write all the ideas I have.
I know, me too. I say, I'm never going to be done with my own stuff. So where you work on yours, I'll work on mine. But yes, first you need to get some classes. And they always kind of like scratch their head and kind of walk away like, she's kind of a drag. But you know, you have to do that, right? So yeah, so write every day. What about number 2?
Okay, number 2 follows pretty closely on that. And that is outline your work before you begin, or if you've already started, soon thereafter. But the outline is your friend. I think a lot of people are down on outlining books. They think it's going to rob them of their creativity. If you probably know, there's this big controversy going on in the writing world now, what they call the pantsers versus the planners, meaning people who write from the seat of their pants, meaning they don't plan at all, as opposed to people who think it out a little bit in advance and make a bare bones outline. It shouldn't take you forever to do. Might take you longer the first time, and it's not a trap. I guarantee when you sit down and write the book, you'll come up with new ideas and better ideas, and you'll be changing things around, and that's just fine. Nonetheless, you're better off for having a roadmap, something you can look at every morning during those 2 or 3 hours you've guaranteed yourself you're going to write. And so instead of killing the first hour staring out the window because you really don't know what's going to happen next, you look down at your outline and say, oh, okay, Daniel's going into court, witness number 1, or whatever it is,
Right.
And that helps you get started. And it does not in the slightest way sap your creativity, but it will absolutely increase your productivity and probably reduce your revision time, because instead of getting to the end of the first draft and realizing there is a fundamental problem with this book, it's boring, or the characters aren't interesting, or the murderer turns out to be exactly who everybody thought it was going to be, or you've thought about these things in advance and planned it out a little bit, and that's just smart.
Well, and also another thing is there's some really good beginnings and maybe some good endings, but that saggy middle is where you lose people. So if you plot out your scene sequel, I kind of follow that, where scene sequel, there's an action and then there's a reaction and then there's action. Readers read books because they want to know what the interior thoughts and feelings of the main character are. And if you just do plot, 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 and you don't ever explore the interior landscape of your characters, you're going to have flat, boring characters that no one really wants to go on the ride. You want characters that people want to take the ride with. So by planning and outlining, where it's going, you could still, the muse will take you places sometimes when you're in the writing creativity, and you can always change it, but you want to make sure you have all those fundamental elements that make up a good story, right?
Right. No, that is such a good point, because this is what happens to pantsers so often. They've got a great idea, so they sit down with a lot of enthusiasm. They don't have time to stop for an outline. They just want to get to it. So they sit down and start writing and get maybe, what do you think, 60, 80, even 100 pages. And then the idea runs out, and they probably know how it's going to end too. But that nasty 200 pages in the middle, they got no clue. And that's why, that is the most common failure in books or manuscripts, is that they sag in the middle, because that's the part they needed to plan out but didn't.
And then what about all those little detours? You just so happen to know how an injection goes, and so you let everybody know your little science, what you learned in Science 101 20 years ago or whatever. Has nothing to do with the plot, has nothing to do with the premise, does not take you any closer to the premise line. What about those little detours?
Yeah, are you talking about like info dumping
Yes.
information?
Yeah,
Or,
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, everybody should do research, which I don't care if it goes before, during, after. Sometimes I'll be starting a scene and think, this guy needs to be doing something crooked, but I don't know what. So I'll go search around and, research and try and come up with something. But you do need to do research. I don't think novels need to be photorealistic. No, I am a lawyer. I have actually tried cases. That said, do the trials in the book really resemble real life trials? They don't, primarily because I've cut out all the boring parts.
Right. Well, you just want to make it, it needs to have some authenticity, but it also, if everything in a book, I think, should go towards the premise. I mean, it should have something to do with something on it. And when you take readers off course, they're going down that through line, right?
Right. Yeah, I was at a conference once, and a police officer, raised his hand to talk and told me, I've practiced as a police officer for so many years, and if I wrote a book, it would be so much more authentic. The stuff I read, it's laughable. It could never happen, and my work would be so much more credible. And I said, yes, but would it be better?
Yeah.
Would it be more interesting? Because that's what craft is all about. Yes, as you were saying, it's got to have verisimilitude. It's got to seem credible. It's not just laughable on its face. But people aren't reading novels for more reality. They want that, they'll go to the newspaper.
Right.
Reading novels because they want to be carried away by a really good story.
Right. You want to lock them and load them. You want to put them on the plane, get them on the seatbelt, and have them take that flight with your characters. Well, so what's number 3?
Well, you've really already anticipated number 3, because that's create multidimensional characters
That's
that
what
your readers will enjoy. And that's the key thing. Remember that you're not writing this book just to please yourself. You're not writing this book as therapy. You're writing it for other people to read and enjoy. At least if you're hoping that this book will go anywhere, that's what you are doing. Too often, I think, when people start, particularly their first book, their tendency is to base the main character on, guess who, Melanie?
Yeah.
Themselves,
of course. It's just easier to do that.
It is easier. I mean, it might be a more glamorous version of yourself with superpowers or something like that, or the version of you who always has the witty, smart remark, exit line that you can never think of in real life. But they base the character on themselves, and then base the location on wherever they live, because that's easier too. And that is not necessarily the best choice. You want to be thinking, how do I create an interesting an intriguing character, maybe something you don't see every day, still credible, but someone who is special in some way or another, has special gifts,
Uh-huh.
or is passionate about something, or funny, or in some way is interesting enough that readers will want to spend time with them.
What about flaws?
Absolutely flaws. I heard somewhere, I don't remember where, but maybe this was Dwight Swain, who we were talking about before in his great classic book on writing. But somewhere, when you're creating your protagonist, you should think, I want to give this person 3 really good characteristics and then 1 bad one flaw, 1 hamartia or tragic flaw, not tragic, but and then when you're creating the protagonist, maybe just the reverse, 3 bad things, but 1 good thing. Make the antagonists real too. They need to seem not just like mustache twirling villains, but real people with real motivations. Anyway, your protagonist does not have to be perfect to be sympathetic. In fact, I would suggest it's just the opposite. When I wrote, you mentioned my first legal thriller, the first Ben Kincaid novel, which would be back in the, well, it doesn't matter anyway. It's been a while
The Dark Ages, like when dinosaurs were roaming the earth.
yeah, since that book was published in '91. Yes, I
Oh
would
my gosh, look at you.
like that. Anyway, okay, so I'm thinking I'm creating a fictional lawyer. Who's the most famous fictional lawyer? Well, at that time, obviously, it would have been Perry Mason. How do you describe Perry Mason's personality? Now we're going to ignore the recent HBO series, which was a whole different thing.
Yeah, I need to
But
watch it. I haven't seen it. Yeah.
at that time, people thought Raymond Burr and the television show, and he didn't seem to have any interior life at all. If he had any romance in his life, we didn't know it. If he had hobbies, we didn't see it. He's just a really good lawyer who somehow had this ability to get people to confess on the witness stand, something which never happens in real life. Like never, ever in the history of jurisprudence did that ever happen in real life, but every episode of Perry Mason. So I tried to create Ben Kincaid to be sort of the anti-Perry, a good lawyer.
Okay.
In time. He grows over time, but far from perfect. He's got his foibles. He's extremely shy. He's a little neurotic. He's not good with other people. But of course, that's where you bring in the other members of the team. That's where you bring in Christina, who maybe doesn't have his extensive education, but she's way better at understanding other people and motivations and communicating and can grease the wheels for him and on and on like that. But I think he was more endearing to people, or enduring, that could work too.
That's a good one. Yeah, I like that.
More endearing to people because of his flaws. I mean, if he were just a total train wreck, nobody would want to read the book, but some good stuff and a flaw, that's more interesting. The current series that I'm working on now, the Daniel Pike series, book 6, by the way, comes out January 19. That's Final Verdict. Anyway, similar with him, I thought, what is he passionate about? He's not just a lawyer. He's going to be part of this group called the Last Chance Lawyers, the lawyers who will represent clients nobody else will touch for one reason or another. What would motivate that? Passion on his part. And of course, as it unfolds, it has very strongly to do with something from his own past, which I'm not going to blow. Go read the book if you're interested. But the point is,
awesome. I
he
love
too
it.
is not 100% perfect person. He's got his foibles like everybody else, but he's got something he's really passionate about, and he's quirky in an interesting way. And I think that makes him multidimensional. Is he like me? I wish.
Yeah, but I'm sure there's
to read about.
Well, I'm sure there's, that's the thing. One of my high school, after my book came out, one of my high school girlfriends called me. She goes, "I'm on page 20 and I don't see us." Like, I said, Karen, I wasn't writing about my high school days with you guys and all my friends. None of y'all are there. No offense or anything, but it's a fiction book. And then everybody thought she was me. But actually, I tailored her after some of the most amazing women lawyers that I know. I mean, she wasn't me, but everybody's looking for that. So, but
my
experience is past that.
Yeah, my experience was everybody thinks they're in the book, whether they are or not, particularly the first one that, I'm Ben and forget it.
Oh, I know, I
You're
know.
never going to talk him out of it.
Yeah, I named a character. I'm not going to say the name just in case he ever hears this, but we have kind of an inside joke with that he thinks he's in the book. I did use his name, but the character is nothing like him. And I don't know if he's even really read the book because he probably wouldn't be telling everybody that he's in the book,
Right.
But it's cute. I like it. You can do all kinds of little things, you can, writing is so great, but you've got to have that roadmap. I mean, learning the craft is just so important. And so many people want to bypass it. All right, that was number 3, multi-dimensional characters. And you really have to write those out. You need to sit and work on crafting your characters, right? You can't just let it flow like the muse, right? You really need to put some elbow grease in who your characters are.
And I wrote a whole book on that. Creating
Okay.
Character is one of in fact, I think it's the second of the books on the Red Sneaker Writers series, which has a lot of forms and exercises and the appendices that are designed to, okay, you're getting ready to write a book. Let's see how well you know your main character or antagonist or the other characters. And you can go through these worksheets and fill out a job application, which I find really useful. It triggers ideas and one thing leads to another. And like I was saying, you think, okay, Dan is really good at this. Why? And where did that come from? And pretty soon you've built a multi-dimensional character.
Yeah, and maybe you don't need to put it all in the book, but the fact that you know your character inside and out, that way they're always going to stay true to what the story is too. I love it. I just love it. Okay, so what about number 4? What's your 4th tip?
Number 4, we're moving forward a little bit in time, assuming that maybe you've finished a first draft. And number 4 is get feedback from others. I think
your wife or your husband?
It depends. Who's the best critic? Now, my wife writes too, and she's a wonderful editor, but I'm not sure everybody is in the same situation. And sometimes your best friend is not the person to ask because your best friend doesn't want to hurt your feelings, right? They're going to read it and say, "Oh, Bill, that was terrific. Good." Well, that doesn't help me at all.
I know.
Thanks for the stroking, but that does not help me in the slightest. You want somebody who'll say, okay, what's going on page 54? Because I didn't understand that at all. And this doesn't make sense. Wouldn't it be simpler to do? And you've got a giant plot hole here. And I didn't understand this motivation. Somebody who will really think about it and read it like a reader, not like somebody who knows the author personally, and give you some meaningful feedback. Those are the people you want to be your beta readers or developmental editors or whatever you want to call it.
What about critique groups?
Yeah, critique. If there are valuable people in it, then great. I've seen situations where people sadly start kind of writing for the critique group, rather than writing to build a good book. And your audience should be beyond the critique group, not in jokes that they'll laugh at, but nobody else will understand.
Right.
But in my retreats, sometimes I see people who are really reluctant to share anything. They're afraid that if their manuscript gets out, then I don't know what'll happen. Somebody will
steal their idea, make millions of dollars off of it.
Is not going to happen. Right. I mean, there is a scandal going on right now. I don't think I mentioned this. I do a podcast every 2 weeks, the Red Sneaker Writers podcast.
Oh, so good. I love that.
Free. Go download the latest one. And there is something going on in the world right now where someone, probably a scout for a movie or TV agency, seems to be hijacking books that haven't been published yet. But those are books that have been sold and they're in the pipeline. They're just grabbing them before the advanced copies go out. That is not the same thing as somebody stealing your unpublished manuscript just because that just doesn't happen. You need to get it out there and get feedback. Go to conferences, go to retreats, get people whose opinions you trust who will actually not just blow it off, but spend some time reading it and giving you meaningful feedback. Here's the thing. I don't care how many books you've written. I've written 54. Final Verdict will be my 54th. And yet I still do not see everything. You get too close to it. You miss things. You assume you've said things that you haven't. And then, you get another set of eyes on it and they can illuminate. And then you think, oh, of course, that's so obvious now that someone has said it, now that somebody's pointed it out to you. So everybody needs editorial input. Everybody needs to hear from others.
Well, and that's also something I think that's encouraging for the audiences to hear is even with as many books as you have, you still have to do the grease and the fire and the the hard work and the labor to get your books done, and they don't just magically pop out. It's still the same process each time. I mean, I'm sure you've gotten better at it, maybe you're faster at it,
I
but
hope
it's
so.
still the day.
I hope so. I'd like to think so.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna sneak up on you one of these days. I gotta just stop the Netflix. But the Netflix is some story creation training, don't you think?
Yes, absolutely. There you go.
Just kidding. I'm just kidding. Okay, so number 4, get feedback from others.
Right.
Retreat groups, writers groups. We're really lucky here in Houston. We've got the Houston Writers Guild. We've got a really close writers community. Romance Writers of America has chapters all over. You got your Oklahoma conference and everything. There's just some really good resources out there, but you just need to get involved, right?
More than there used to be, yes.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, what about number 5?
5, choose the path that fits you best. And here I'm talking again, post-writing. People are asking, oh, should I go traditionally published? Should I try and get one of those big New York publishers? Should I go for a medium-sized publisher, small publisher? Should I publish it myself? And we could do another hour on that easily. Maybe that should be next month.
Yes.
But short answer, you got to do what's going to make you happy. You're the one who wrote the book. All of those paths are viable. Some are easier than others, but all of them are viable today. It didn't used to be. Used to be self-publishing was a complete dead end. There was no way to make that work because you couldn't get your book in the bookstores. Well, today you can. You can get them all over. You may not get them in brick and mortar stores, but you can get them online, which is where the majority of books are selling. You got to think about what's best for this book and what's best for me. What's going to make me happy? What's going to make me feel fulfilled, like I've accomplished my goals? And that's it. Forget about whether your neighbor or friends are going to be impressed because you got a contract with so-and-so company, or they're going to criticize you because you did it yourself. This is the only business in the entire world where people get criticized for running their own business. Normally entrepreneurs are complimented, but in the writing world, people cast scorn on it. It makes no sense. But
right, and that's such a good point, Bill, because I always tell people, you have to, you write because you have a story inside yourself that you want to share. And for me, being in, when you're writing and that creativity is flowing and everything's happening, and something in your characters, there's characters that appear, they just come off the page, or they do something, you have it planned and you got your scene, but then all of a sudden somebody pulls out a gun and shoots somebody. I remember when I called Rita one day and I said, Rita, you're not going to believe this. Nick shot Rudolfo in Alex's office and now she's got red blood all over her carpet. I didn't know that scene was going to go that way that day, but it did, and it was wonderful. But so that the thrill of that is worth everything for me. It's like I don't know about you, sometimes when you're writing, don't you sort of get like endorphins, oxytocins are flowing, and it's just really fun. So that's the part, editing is a little bit more droll, but the writing part is what's so much fun. So you got to really know, why are you doing this? Why do you want to tell this story? And if you're doing it just to get rich and just to be an overnight sensation, it's not, John Grisham sold his books out of his back car. John Grisham went to writers groups. John Grisham learned the craft just like all of us. He wasn't an overnight sensation. I mean, it's just a lot of work.
Right. Which leads beautifully to point number 6, which is don't quit your day job. And I'm serious about that.
Perfect. I know.
And it's not because I lack confidence in your writing. It's because that's just a really foolhardy thing to do that you might later regret. I mean, there are a few people who have gotten very wealthy writing, but they are the minority. And that's not because there aren't good writers out there. That is just the reality of the situation. I think I mentioned that I had written 6 or 7 books before I stopped practicing law, and those books were hitting the bestseller list from the get-go, and money was coming in. Nonetheless, I had children. I was the sole support. You just don't jump precipitously. This is the world of the arts. Books are part of the world of arts and entertainment, just like everything else. And I guarantee in every career in the arts, there are going to be ups and downs and hills and valleys. You can't assume that because this book sold well, the next one will, or that everything's going to go just as it was. Just be careful and don't quit your day job until you've got enough money in the bank that you could live for a decent period of time, even if the next book tanks, because you just never know. Most writers have some second job that they do, and that's not necessarily a bad thing either. I get out and teach mostly in part just because I don't want to spend my whole life sitting here in front of a laptop typing all day long. Occasionally, you got to get out and interact with people. Having another thing you do is not a bad thing necessarily.
Right. And I always say it is a marathon, not a jog. So
Right.
you got to be prepared for that marathon. And the other thing, that's something it's kind of teaching. I'm fixing to write an article. I'm probably going to ask you to be in my article if you don't mind. It's a GP Solo magazine, the National ABA, a magazine for solo small firms, about being a writer, a lawyer writer. And I just thought of that just now. But I've been able to leverage my writing in my business, in my craft. I mean, because people love it to, when you walk into a courtroom and the judge says, "Oh, Miss Bragg, I just finished your book. It's awesome." And everybody hears about it. That gives you credibility in your profession. So you can leverage your writing career in your regular business in some way or another. People respect you more. I mean, when you finish the book and you've gotten it published, you have a little bit more cred. So it may not be translated in dollars and cents directly in the very beginning, but I still think it's a worthy thing. Do you think?
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that.
Okay.
Yeah, I had to, my first royalty was like $7 less than my hourly rate. I kind of went, I went 1 hour. I mean, I spent, years and thousands of dollars, whatever, to get that, and I thought maybe I shouldn't quit my day job yet. But yet the satisfaction and the joy that I've gotten out of being a published author is just, words can't really describe it. So number 7, what is our last one? We're kind of coming.
Number 7's right from the heart, which actually you already touched upon. But now I'm talking about write a book that's important to you, that's going to matter to you. That doesn't necessarily mean it won't be a success. You won't make any money. Nobody will read it. I think everybody will write their best book when they're writing something they care about. Sometimes you hear people say, "Well, I got to follow the market trend," and that's a mistake. The trend will probably be over before you get there. And even if it's not, who cares? Nobody does a good job, does their best work when they're writing something they don't really care about or possibly even understand, that cynical, "Oh, well, I read 2 romance novels and I had the whole thing figured out." Well, you know what? You probably didn't. You just think you do because you were taking a cynical approach. I had a dear friend several years ago. I won't give details that would give it away, but he told me it because I knew he had writing ambitions. He said, "Well, I was thinking I would write 3 or 4 genre novels just to get my foot in the door and then write a book that mattered." Well, what's wrong with that picture? In the first place, the way he was talking about the genre novels said that he felt contemptuous about them. He had no respect for it. Those books aren't going to turn out well. And even if they did, would his publisher then say, "Hey, why don't you write something completely different?" No, they just want more of the same because that's what he was successful at. So that was a flawed plan from the get-go. Here's what I'm going to say. Write a book you care about, do the best job with that you possibly can, and then do your best to sell that book. Do something you'll be proud of. At this point, as I said, I've had 53, about to be 54 published novels. Some of them have been national bestsellers. Some of them have been complete flops. But you know what? If you wrote it for the right reason, if you wrote a book you cared about, it doesn't really matter. I mean, I'd rather have a hit than a miss, but regardless, that book's up on that shelf over there, and I did the best job I could with it, and it mattered to me, and I'm proud that I got it done. And that's what's most important.
And you didn't give up, Bill. Look at
Right,
that. You
right.
didn't give up. And that's so amazing. And I love, I always think about contriving, I don't want to contrive anything. If I'm having to contrive something, it just doesn't work. So you have to stay true to yourself. One thing that I learned when I was working with my writing teacher, as you know, the grand dame of novel structure, Rita Gallagher, every time Rita, she always said, every word is $1 to an editor. Like she looked at words as, in monetary units. So she would change things or take a word out. Like if I said Old Spice cologne, she'd want to take out Old Spice and make it just cologne, or something like that. So every time I argued with her and every time I insisted, that my gut said, do this, inevitably in my critique group, that would always be the thing that my critique group loved the most. So that was kind of like the lesson I learned from that was follow your own gut, listen to your teachers, learn your craft, but always follow your own gut. I mean, don't do what everybody tells you to do or what's going to be popular, thinking about what you love surfing, right? What's your favorite surfing movie?
I'm really not an expert surfer at all.
Have you seen Riding Giants?
Have I what?
Have you seen Riding Giants?
I don't think so.
Yeah, you need to see that movie. It's about Laird Hamilton's life. Anyway, but yeah, when you just want to stay on the cusp of that way, you want to be in that sweet spot of the wave. You don't want to be, you don't want the wave to be already in, and then you're like, oh, I missed the wave. But that following your own gut and your own spirit's going to help you do that.
Right, absolutely. It
Awesome.
takes too long to write a book. Don't waste all that time on something you're not going to care about, because it's probably not going to turn out well if you do. Write
you
something
think people should have
care about.
accountability partners? Would that be helpful?
I don't know. I think people just need to put themselves in the chair and make themselves right every day. That's more than any other single thing the key to success.
Yeah, and once you get in the habit of it, I remember I used to write in the evenings at night, and I would wake up, and then I had to be at court at 9 o'clock the next morning, and I would just be up all night. I'd be typing in my thoughts, typing my thoughts out, kind of. But that's just what you have to do to get things done. Well, you have so motivated and inspired me, William. I mean, I love everything that you've done. That you were a Jeopardy champion.
That is
wow.
true.
You're a very multifaceted person, and then you get to share this, plus you get to do the writers conferences. I'm definitely going to sign up for the writers con for next year. Cool. And I think everybody listening to this that really wants to achieve their dreams, these 7 tips are invaluable. Sharon, do you have anything else that we want to throw in here?
No, you all have done a great job. And I want to say thank you to both you and Bill. And I want you all to understand that you guys are my superheroes. Melanie will tell you, Bill, I love authors. It's as if you all just bring me so much joy. And so when you get to do for the people that you love what I do, it's just
I know, isn't it great? I love it.
Yes, it is. And Bill is just a walking encyclopedia, life experience and writing and you name it. So I mean, I'm over here just with my pom-poms, just shaking my pom-poms.
Yeah, I needed this today, Sharon. I really needed this today because I haven't been as prolific of a producer. I've practiced law, sometimes I just practice law and my brain is just done at the end, but I'm going to do a 30-day deal, Bill. I'm going to commit here. Well, I hope some of our viewers will commit to just writing for the next 30 days. Just let's all set some goals, set some resolutions, and get this next year on the road.
That's the best resolution you could make. There you go.
I love it because a habit only takes like 30 days to really create a habit. It's kind of uncomfortable at first, but once we get into new habits, and I think this year, 2020 has been a year where we've all had to create a lot of new habits. So we're kind of in the habit of creating new habits this year because everything has changed. So I think this will be a good time for everybody to get motivated and really read up on the Red Sneakers books and look into the Writers' Conference and also his new book coming out. That's really going to be exciting. So I thank you, Bill, for this wonderful interview, and I appreciate the opportunity to get to talk to you.
Thank you, Melanie. It's been fun.
And I'm going to call you about that interview. I mean, that article that I have due, it's due like the middle of January. So I've got to talk to writers that lawyer author writers. So that'll be wonderful. Will you go ahead and do that with me?
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Well, guys, it's time to say goodbye to our wonderful audience. We appreciate you, and we know that you can get it done in 2021. And Bill has laid out a roadmap like none other. So we appreciate you, and we say, pull up that computer and just start doing it. Just do it like the Nike slogan says. Have a great 2021, and we're going to be looking for your book. Let us know when. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.